Hello and welcome to Bricks Videos. This is a channel where we answer all your questions related to property buying. Today's video is a quick guide for property buyers purchasing from an NRI. Property purchase in general is a bit perplexing considering the documentation and paperwork involved, especially if the seller is an NRI. Hence, follow some of the expert suggested tips in this video before purchasing a property from an NRI to have a hassle-free experience. Whether the property is being purchased from a resident Indian or an NRI, PAN card is a must. So keep in mind, both buyer and seller should have a PAN card to carry out the transaction, and if the seller is more than one in number, which is in the case of joint sellers, then both NRI sellers should have PAN cards separately, and the same applies to joint buyers. A buyer must have a tax deduction and collection account number, which is a TAN. For TDS deduction and payment, TAN is a must, though it is not mandatory for NRI seller to have a TAN. If the buyer does not have a TAN number, then the buyer is advised to apply for a TAN number along with the joint buyer if there are any. In case if the property has multiple owners associated, then buyer should ensure that all owners are on board and agree upon selling the property. Also, a buyer should ensure that the payment is done in equal proportions to all the sellers in order to stay away from any legal risk later. In case if the NRI seller fails to be physically present in India and complete the transaction process, then the NRI has to designate a special power of attorney to a relative or a reliable person to carry out the transaction on behalf of NRI. Also, the special power of attorney should specify property details and complete self-details. For an NRI property, the payment should be made only to the NRI seller in his or her bank account. The SPOA, which is Special Power of Attorney holder, may compel the buyer to deposit funds to his or her own account instead of NRI's account. But bear in mind, SPOA holders is just a representative of the NRI for the transaction execution, and the statements of fund transfer to the NRI's account would be handy in the future to stay away from any legal hassles. NRI sellers from Afghanistan, China, Pakistan, Bhutan, Nepal and Sri Lanka must have an approval from the Central Bank of India to sell their property. So it is always advised to check for the same before a property purchase from an NRI. So the crux of the matter is TDS on the property that a buyer purchases. According to Section 195 of the income tax, the buyer is responsible to deduct TDS at the time of payment to the NRI seller. In case of payments being done in the form of installments, TDS should be deducted as and when installment is paid. The rate at which TDS has to be deducted on property purchase from an NRI is different to that of a purchase from a resident Indian. TDS is applicable at the rate of 20.80% for properties costing less than Rs 50 lakh, 22.88% for properties priced between 50 lakh and 1 crore, and 23.92% for properties costing more than Rs 1 crore. More importantly, the TDS percentage is calculated on the capital gains earned by the NRI according to Section 195 of the Income Tax Act. Having a TAN is must after the buyer deducts the TDS amount in order to deposit with the government. To know more about paying TDS on property purchase, watch our related video by clicking on the link in the description box below. TDS must be deposited on or before the 7th of the month immediately succeeding the month of deduction, and buyer should pay TDS from self account. Also, it is of utmost importance to note here that the buyer should also file for TDS returns by submitting Form 27Q. After filing TDS return, the buyer should issue Form 16A to NRI, which certifies the amount of TDS paid to the government. It is advised to the buyer to be cautious and follow all these steps to stay away from any upcoming legal issues. This brings us to the end of this video. We hope we have answered your queries relating to this video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below and we respond to every comment we receive. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and share our videos if you like our work. And don't forget to watch our related videos.